My computer took a little bit. All right, good. So today's topic, Shotos. We'll talk about them in general, but also we'll go in the direction later on of, are they standard or beginner characters? So different to the previous sessions, there's not much for me to say in the beginning, so we can kind of just get to the meat of, like, what are Shotos, what do you think of them, is there something you'd like to say about them, anything you can think of, and then I'll kind of bind it together in a direction. And because I guess let's start with Andele. Hey.
Yeah. What Shotos are, you mean?
Sure. Or whatever you think's important about them.
I mean, the most Shotos usually, like the question implies, seem like a standard character. It's like they have a fireball. They have usually, since that's kind of in Street Fighter defined it that well, like a Dragon Punch, and then one combo move, Tatsu-esque move that moves them forward. And depending on game, they can have like a lot of other things as well. Or depending on how wide you span the range of Shoto, but those are like the usual three most prominent things about a Shoto that I just think of when I hear that word. Just like fireball, some kind of dash forward thing, and some kind of anti-air thing.
Yeah, I think that's fits it pretty much. Like you said, like Shotos tend to maybe have like one or two tools more, and that's really game dependent or character dependent.
Since like nowadays, just having three moves is for most games feels like just three special moves is just not enough, since most characters have like at least four, if not like crazy amounts up with Blast Blue or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true. I know what you mean, right? Like, especially like anime games, and especially if they're like older, like Blaze Blue and Guilty Gear, characters have like 6 to 10 moves, right?
Yes.
But I think actually there's still plenty of games with plenty of characters where people are like, how many specials does he have? Oh, I have 3, maybe 4. Just yeah, just a happenstance of the games we play, I guess, that there's more. Nobody's Dante either. Okay. I feel like that was exhaustive for like an initial like definition that we want to go in. Unless anyone wants to say that we should maybe not be thinking about Shotos that way in any sort of way, in which case just interrupt me, then it's your turn right now. We can sort of move along with these tool sets, kind of get that out of the way. So let's just start with probably the thing that's the most important, I guess. Dragon punches. So God Kaiser, you actually usually play like rushdown characters, but I know that you played like a lot of Lin, so that's like a kind of aggressive Shoto, right? What are dragon punches good for, in your opinion? You can go as wide as possible. In fact, that'd be great.
In the traditional sense, it's just an anti-air tool, right? But I don't know, it has other applications. You can use it to reversal on wake up sometimes. It's not the best strategy. When people start blocking it, it's bad, but you can do it. To maybe get one in off guard while your enemy's off guard, trying to approach you and wake up. Besides that, I don't know. Yeah, mostly reversal options and anti-air.
Yeah, I'd say that's it's about true. I mean, as you guys can see, like, initial round, we'll go through it real quick, just everybody has a little bit to say, and then we'll get to the meat. Okay, then Vic, Tatsu or fireballs, whatever you think you can talk about more. Specifically, the Shoto's usage of them, though.
Well, you said your like DP is like generally the most important. I would say like most Shotos definitely have like a fireball more than a DP most of the time.
Really?
DPs is yeah. It's like kind of hard because you usually have like two tools to be like somewhat of a Shoto. It's not because you just have a DP or just have like a fireball that you are Shoto.
This is
right?
true. Yes.
So you generally have like either fireball DP or fireball Tatsu. But I feel like if you have like a DP and a Tatsu, I'm not sure you would be called like Shoto. But I feel like fireball are like essential to at least the Street Fighter Shoto type of character.
Yeah, I guess it's I guess it sort of depends also what kind of I think you're right, like fireball plus Shoryuken, that's your Street Fighter Shoto, right? And then if you get to SNK games, it gets like really murky. Those guys tend to jump in people's faces more than go up, right? Like Terry Bogard doesn't always actually have like his rising tackle, but he usually ends up having is it called a power dunk? Yeah, which is sort of a DP, I guess.
It's a DP Tatsu.
Yeah, that's sort of the thing, right?
But Smash it uses a DP motion.
Yeah, I mean that is the input also. Like it's just that Terry has like more moves than he has in every iteration where he's in, right? It's more like he's some RPG character that goes to each new game and he's like, what am I gonna take with me today? I feel like the only ones that he actually always has is Burning Knuckle, where he flies forward. And yes, he doesn't have it in Garou, Mark of the Wolves, but I'm gonna say that Old Man Terry is slightly different. And that shot that travels across the ground. I forget what it's called.
Power Wave?
Power Wave, yeah.
Yeah.
So in that case, yeah, I guess that for Terry specifically, it's more like he has a quote-unquote Tatsu and a fireball. But that's very SNK-ish. So yeah, indeed, I think like Shoryuken plus fireball is more recognizable for Shotos. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's just like, but yeah, as you said, always as a DP is just like Terry has like a weird DP, let's say.
Yes.
But otherwise, he always has his fireball, no matter like what kind of, even in Garou, right? So that's definitely like, fireball is really more like the temple of like of Shotos, I feel. Because if you look at like Street Fighter 2, Ryu and stuff, the main game plan is just to spam the fireball and just entire you with like either like maybe like down heavy punch or DP. I feel like after a while like the fireball would change though, like you will not be able to spam them. You will have like different Shotos over the time, like Soul still has a fireball, but you cannot use it like Ryu fireball, so it will change over time.
Sort of. I feel like Soul's fireball goes like a lot more in the direction of Ryus that were able to walk forward and kind of pressure with their fireball, and now the fireball is just for that. Yeah,
but it's not generally like the main use like in Street Fighter, right?
Correct, but it's one use, like in general.
And generally, like I think Soul like can do like frame trap with it. I'm not sure you can really do frame traps on Street Fighter with that, because like it's more or less like your turn is over if you do like a close Hadouken in guard.
Yeah, I feel like frame traps aren't possible, but you can punish someone that thought that they were allowed to move into a certain space right now.
If you like pushing a medium kick into fireball, yeah,
exactly. Yeah, Yeah, I think that's good for Fireball. Well, like, I guess we don't have to explain that in combination with the Shoryuken, that sets up a kind of game plan that works in some games where the Shoto will spams fireballs and hopes that you jump into a Shoryuken. But yeah, that's
you don't hopes normally, you react to it. But yeah,
well, yeah, but
if you hopes, that's a problem.
Sure. I'm just saying, if the other guy is being so careful that it's like, I probably can't DP him safely, then it's yeah. Okay. Feel like I talked a lot in response, so Andele, I think you're someone who likes moves that move you forward, right? Get in people's face. So, what's your opinion on how to use like Tatsu-like maneuvers, or what role they play specifically for the Shoto in his overall game plan that we've been sort of constructing?
Feels like usually that's like the counter to the, well, in the terms that I know it, because I'm not a very big Street Fighter guy, I don't know if it actually works there. You use that to kind of also have another way around the fireball spam thing, because sometimes these forward dashing moves have like properties that let them be really good against that kind of zoning, against just like straight fireballs to try to hit you. Can beat them out and go in further or something like that. But that's really game dependent. I feel like the Tatsu move of the Shoto is like usually feels like the most game dependent, really, as to what they do and what they have. Some are just like combo fodder. And for example, I know Smash Ryu better than Street Fighter Ryu, so in Smash, Ryu's Tatsu is now invincible on all of his legs, like not just the legs they're swinging. So now you can actually use it to get like through projectile aggression, which makes it suddenly really good to get in. But before they patched that and before they changed that, it wasn't a move that would do that. You would just get hit. So I feel like the Tatsu move is really the most dependent on how they are specific in their game. That's kind of the hardest thing to talk about broadly. Usually in the games I play, they're just mostly combo fodder, though.
Yeah. I do think that that's true to some extent, though. Like, I mean, when I normally think about a Tatsu, I usually think about Ryu Tatsu, but if you look at a broad range of fighting games, it does end up being the case that they sometimes have this sort of role to just get through things. I mean, some Tatsus are like Mizoguchi and later on Akatsuki, where it's just like, actually it's for pressure. Right? That's just kind of funny. There's just these two characters that both scream Chesto when they do their kicks. Just kicking you in the face. Mizoguchi is even like a strange case, because he actually was a character that he was player 2, like not the player 1 Shoto. He wasn't a Shoto, actually. Like, he didn't have a DP. He just had a Tatsu maneuver that was like a Rekka. He could decide to do up to 4 kicks. Which is a criminal amount. They do good chip. His fireball is big, but not that great at zoning. It's just then when he got his own game that he then got a DP and he was player 1. So I guess, yeah, then he was a Shoto. But yeah, personally, I think like something that that Tatsus end up being able to do in games where you can't move very quickly forward is they cover a gap in the fireball plus Shoryuken game, where someone is trying to move in but doesn't want to jump, and you can move yourself forward and kick them in the face. That's something you can do oftentimes as well with these kinds of maneuvers. Yeah. Or just jump across the screen screaming like Terry Bogard, I guess. But that's Terry Bogard. Yeah. Anybody have another comment that they want to get in on Shotos, or a specific Shoto that you'd like to talk about? Otherwise, I'd move on. We're doing
Okay,
great on
move
time, so yes. We good? We
We
good.
can move on, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, shoulder tools makes a lot of sense. Easy to go over. So many people think that two things about Shotos, right? One, that they are standard characters, and two, that they're good beginner characters. We'll talk about the beginner stuff later. Though if you think that you need to pull something forward about it, feel free to. A question would be if they are standard characters. I guess like God Kaiser. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, in most games, player 1 and player 2 are Shoto characters. Not in all, but in most games that's the case. Developers try to mix it up with some stuff, like in first edition of Street Fighter 3, where it's like, I don't remember the names, Yun and Yo or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're mostly like Wrecker based, I think. So it really depends on the game, but in most cases, player 1 and player 2 are Shoto characters, so like traditional Shotos are pretty standard, I guess, I feel.
Yeah. They are most of the time player 1 and player 2. I mean, that is true. That developers think they're standard characters has to be true at this point, or everyone's just kind of drunk. I don't know. Just yeah. Okay. I guess I'll ask everyone. Vic, do you have any specific thoughts about that?
About like them being like standard or good for beginners? I mean,
standard. Good for beginners. If you want to talk about now, you can as well. But standard.
I mean, most main characters are like Shotos, so I feel at this point they are the standards. Or at least like the basic character. Not all everyone like has the same Shotos though, so depending if it's anime, Marvel or stuff like that, it will change how the Shoto is, I guess. But otherwise they are all kind of similar, like standardized, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends like what type of game they're in, right? The more traditional the fighting game, the more they're going to be really, really like Ryu, right?
Yeah.
And the archetype works more in there too. Whereas like if you get to anime games, I feel like those usually also have Shotos, right?
Yeah.
But they tend to have more gimmicks added to them, like Ragnar the Blood Edge with his life regaining stuff, or like I was going to say like there's Soul and there's Kai, but Kai is actually like super Shoto, so like his extra tools just kind of fit in even more with being a Shoto, so that's a bad example. Yeah. People in Darkstalkers. Okay, everybody in Darkstalker has a command grab, but Morrigan has Morrigan dashes. That sort of thing.
Yeah, but otherwise she has really just Shoto tools, kind of.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Would you say that in Hyper Fighters we have Shotos as standard characters? I feel like not really in those.
I mean, you do, but it's not the one that people play. So I like depend on what you want to mean by that, but like Ryu is there.
Yeah.
There is Shotos. Akuma is there. So that's another Shoto. So like on steroid, because they can do beams and like crazy shit, but they are definitely here.
Yeah, because the direction I want to push that in is sort of that, like, what standard means, right? Just kind of depends on what sorts of situations are going to come up in your fighting game, right? And in hyper fighters, I feel like it's pretty extreme. Insofar that usually if you look at like the suggested characters, you know, if you just mash the button and you just get all the pre-selects, you do end up having like a Shoto in there, but hyper fighters actually aren't prone to providing the kind of gameplay where you can be like, I'm gonna just fireball on DP, because it just doesn't work in those games. Yeah, and
I mean, yes and no. You can like DPs are still viable, just like different. You have to use assist to cover you and stuff. You can also just like whiff cancel it, right? So you can. Sure, you won't play like a Street Fighter or Shoto, but you still have a lot of people that are actually Shotos.
Yeah,
in them.
Sure,
and
but
I guess there is some Shotos like kind of like Marvel-ish Shotos, like Magneto and type of thing. That are more like the Shoto of a Marvel could be like Magneto, if it makes sense. I don't know.
I think this going in the same direction, but basically, but I want to be terminologically clear. Basically, Magneto is more the kind of standard character for Marvel, right, than Ryu would be. Is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. I'm saying that there is the Shotos because it's Marvel versus Capcom and it's like a fighting game, so there is like definitely a Shotos, but there is like, well, it's funny because like I think
characters for Marvel, right?
Yeah.
There are better like standard characters for Marvel than Shotos, basically.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like I think like the player 1 and player 2 are Ryu and like Captain America on the other side.
No,
so...
Iron Man.
Iron Man? Now?
Yes. If you just mash A, you get Ryu and Iron Man. That's the AFK.
No,
team.
on the other team, like.
Oh, you mean that?
Yeah, not as a second like team member.
I think it's still Iron Man. Oh, Captain Marvel, maybe one of those two.
Yeah.
I think it's Captain America on the other side because they are both like the.
Yeah. Like I'm not sure how it is exactly with the Marvel games, but with the team games that I do know, usually it's you do have like one Shoto in there, but all the other characters are definitely like other characters, and there's going to be somebody with big beams or something else like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it will just be the character next to the Shoto.
Yeah,
that might be.
Exactly. But then that's also going to be someone who's useful for like fighting as a team, right? Just stuff like that. It's seldom that you have a game where it's like I think the dumbest version of that I've seen is in Umineko Golden Fantasia, where it's like, okay, both player 1 and 2 mash out their team. Okay, so player 1 gets Ryu and Ken. Player 2 gets Ken and a rushdown character. What? Huh? Like they actually share one character but one of them gets it at step 2 and the other one at step 1. It's yeah, I think other than that it's always like different characters. Like Dragon Ball Fighter Z I think is that way too, but I don't remember what they are exactly.
I'm sure you end with Goku and Goku and Goku.
No, like it's actually pretty colorful. Like
you're sure that?
Yes, because I looked it up at some point. You do have the white boss from Yamek. I think it's called Yamek.
You get Frieza, Kid Buu, and someone else.
Yeah. Exactly.
Some normal-sized person. That's really neat for training mode because you have like Frieza, Kid Buu is small, and then I think someone normal or big-sized.
Yeah.
It's not just a villain team and a hero team, so I think they one is like Goku, Vegeta, Gohan,
think
or some shit
Trunks.
like that, or Piccolo. Yeah, or
Isn't
Trunks.
Trunks, I think.
And the other team is, I think, like Frieza, Kid Buu, and Cell? Or something like that?
Yeah, but yeah, like it's sort of like a team that's well spread out, but they're also all different characters, right? Nobody gets like the same ones, and you have one character in the team that kind of has like the sort of standard quote unquote Shoto toolset, but everybody else doesn't, because there's other things that you need to do in a team. Yeah, that was kind of a big divergence, but so I'll just cut it at that, because yeah. But looking at time, yeah, that should be fine. Let's Andele, you know Ryoken and Terry from Smash, right?
Yes.
And while it happens that these are Shotos in their games, nothing about what is a Shoto sort of matters when you're in a platform fighter, right? Or what's your perspective on this?
This is kind of true and kind of not true, since there was a person I followed, because when they came out, obviously I tried to play with a new character. I always do. And the person I followed was like, you can just play them like literal Shotos. You can just kind of throw out fireballs, notice every now and then, kind of slowly close the gap and force them into a corner. When they try to hop over you can literally just show you it works. But it's not really the most optimal thing for Smash, since movement is so quick and stuff, and you can go way higher than you could show you and stuff like that. You can play them like normal Shotos, but it wouldn't be really the most optimal play. The most optimal play is kind of really close quarters. You really try to just get in and do your crazy shit, because you have guard break setups and stuff like that.
So are their Tatsus more useful?
Now, yes, since they got buffed. You can actually go through projectiles with them and avoid zoning with that. They're really strong now.
I see. Okay.
And Terry plays a lot different from the other two. Terry's way more mobile and even more get-in themed than Ryu and Ken. Where Ryu has like the most keep-out version, since his fireballs are the best of the three.
Yeah, I mean that's also true of his own game. So that's he's just more aggressive. Like yeah, that's how he is. Okay, just wildly trying to pick something where God Kaiser can talk a lot on. Okay, let's try this. God Kaiser, I'm just going to use you as my first conversational partner to start this, and this is probably going to be the phase where we're going to go get chaotic altogether then, but I'll start off with you. So here's a thought, right? So I'm personally someone, I agree, like historically and fighting game design wise, the Shotos are like standard characters, right? I mean, that's just a simple thing, but I think to be like a standard character, for that to make sense, would mean that you have tools that cover kind of all important situations. Now, all of us here play not just traditional fighting games. We usually like play anime and hyper fighters, right? And I feel like Shotos don't really, and I think that's just true of traditional fighters too, but I don't think actually Shotos cover all sorts of situations, and that ultimately it's not really necessary to have them be like a standard character. What do you think? I mean, like, if that's too vague, I can go into more detail.
Yeah, I was about to say, what do I think about it being a necessity that Shotos are standard characters?
That's one way to approach it, yeah. I think it's not necessary, basically, because I think what it means to have like someone that's good against all fighting game situations, it may have made sense briefly after Street Fighter 2 to have like the Shoto be that, but like we know how weird fighting game characters can get, right? And matchup play is like really important, especially in games like BlazBlue. And there's way more situations that a Shoto can't cover than that he can cover. So I'm just questioning the idea that he should be a standard character. Yeah.
I don't know, if I think of a character that has a kit to like deal with every situation, kind of, would be like not really weak, but also not really strong, right? You would just be two all around and not really good at anything, but also not really bad.
Yeah.
Which in most cases in anime fighters and hyper fighters, I feel wouldn't work that well, because it makes more sense to have a character that's kind of specialized in one thing or two, and try to use those tools against your enemies that have like another area of speciality on their character.
Yeah. So just so I understand, what you're saying is basically like a Shoto is actually already like a specialized character. Whether or not they're like player 1 or 2, that's a different thing.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. Yeah. 'Cause sure, I mean like since fighting games are made for fighting gamers, it's good to have some sort of common ground to introduce the game to people. But when you think about how like the entire flow of the game or the matchups that are presented in it work, then I guess like the Shoto is then one specialist among other specialists. I mean, sure. Vic, any thoughts on that?
Not especially, I guess. I mean, as other standards, yes, because everyone has one. But yeah, I don't know.
I see. Yeah, I guess maybe the word standard is getting too vague here. I mean, they are definitely like gold standard, right? Every game has them. You have them in there, so you can get people into your game. But
so are they necessary? Yes, because everyone else is using them, so not having them will hinder your game, I think.
Yeah, because I think like even if you don't want to make them like your player 1 and player 2 characters, right? You'd still want to have one because that's a kind of gameplay that you want to have in your game, kind of like you want Zangief in there, right? I mean, a grappler. Just yeah, I think that is true.
Also, it feels like Shotos can happen really quickly on accident. Just like imagine Nova in Marvel Infinite, if he had like if one of his punches were like an uppercut thing, then he would also just be accidentally Shoto. He has like a little fireball thing. He has a Tatsu dash forward thing, and if he had an uppercut, he would just be Shoto again. Mix-up heavy Shoto, but you could call him a Shoto.
Yeah, I mean that happens with rushdown characters sometimes, right? I mean, Chip Zanov has a DP, and he has a projectile that you just don't use for projectile usages, but he has one. So yeah, like I mean that's a thing. It's sort of like I guess I agree with what Vic said earlier. Like if you have a DP plus a fireball and you can use your fireball for zoning, then you're probably more a Shoto than if you had like just a Tatsu and a fireball. But yeah, like good point. I guess I'll ask some leading questions about this topic and try to catch some of you with it. So we talked about like player 1, player 2. They're usually Shotos, right? If we need them for various reasons in our games. Whether they're the standard character or not, well, sort of depends on the game. If you have a traditional fighting game, it's more true. It's less true with others. But I think something that's done like a lot, for example, is sort of the Ryu and Ken meme, right? So player 1 and player 2, usually one of them's more aggressive than the other. It historically switches which one's the more aggressive one. We don't need to talk about that. But that sort of shows the direction that goes in. Is it important to have like player 1 as a defensive Shoto and player 2 as an aggressive Shoto? I guess I'm asking the same thing as before, but maybe you now kind of see the direction that I'm going in here. I guess Andele.
It's kind of like having player 1 is more defensive. I guess that is nicer for beginners, because when you turn on the game and you do anything on your own, you just get the more defensive person. You don't... Being aggressive is most of the time kind of harder. Not in all games. For example, something like Marvel can be so crazy that just like being aggressive is like 3 button presses while the enemy has to like block high-low within like a few frames. But usually like being defensive is the more comfortable thing, especially if you're new, since being super aggressive is kind of hard, and if you just press button on someone's shield and you're unsafe, you just get punished. You're like, I feel like a lot of new players might either just mash or like be comfortable hanging back a bit. So having someone with more defensive tools or stronger defensive tools makes more sense in my opinion, and then having the next character that you kind of see be a more aggressive one, so that you're like led into that direction, also makes sense to like, yeah, to just lead people towards what you want them kind of to play like, or how do you want them to learn your game.
That's pretty funny that you're the one to say this, because I'm pretty sure that the other 3 here super don't agree, but funnily enough, this is what used to be true. So player 1 Shotos used to be the one that's more defensive, and now player 1 Shotos are the ones that are more aggressive, as in like it used to be the case that you had like Ryu versus Ken, right? But now it's like Ragnar versus Jin. Just yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean you're wrong.
Only Noxus.
It starts with Terry Bogard, to be fair, right? Like, he's just more aggressive than whoever ends up being on player 2 in the respective game.
But I would also agree that player 1 characters nowadays tend to be more flamboyant, while player 2 characters are more the cool, calculated type of character.
Yeah. Which is kind of all like also like a color game, right? And that's also an Arxis thing, but also comes from like SNK and Capcom games, right? Where it's like, well, red and black, right? You get in people's faces, and then the other guy is just kind of bluish white because Ice Princess. I don't know. It's not always the case. I mean, like Under Night In-Birth is you have the more defensive Shoto, quote unquote, simply because Lin is so fucking aggressive, who's black and red, and Lin has a yellow jacket. It wouldn't have made sense to make her blue, to be fair, with what we're talking about. So, but yeah.
Which is also nice, because yellow actually is a color that often is associated with rushdown type characters. Instead of colors. At least in the NARC system and work games. And they do it a lot. Like Juba is yellow, Milia is yellow.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Wonder where that comes from. Never thought about this. Okay. Vic, you seemed like you wanted to add something?
I mean, not especially. Again, I think it's mainly access for like the last point, but yeah.
Okay.
After that,
yeah. Like to tie that together, and also with the color thing and what we were saying earlier about like not necessarily you have to have like player 2 as a Shoto. in Examo, for example, like in Arcana Heart, I mean, by, I guess, Team Arcana now, but by Examo, you have like you actually have, well, I guess, two pretty aggressive characters as player 1 and 2. Since it's a girl game, I guess I know Heart is pink instead of red. But what's interesting there is that, like, the blue character, the second player, is definitely, like, also really aggressive, and she doesn't even have, like, a fireball, and she's a charged character. There's some games like that where like you have one Shoto, and that's player 1, and the second player is something else that's normally like seen as defensive in some way. Arcana Heart kind of doesn't do that, like, but still uses sort of the color combination, I guess it makes sense. And usually those are like charge characters, or they're Yaido characters like Ukyo from the first Samurai Showdown. Or like, I guess, because I guess that became a thing again, Yai Arthur from Mab. But she's odd. Yeah, I guess that was more of a comment. All right. We sort of talked about some of the stuff that goes into thinking, okay, what's like a standard character. I guess the only thing we didn't really talk about is like what standard fighting situations are, and what would, and if Shotos cover those, but we can do that while we go into the question of, are Shotos good beginner characters? Because I feel like that's a separate concept, right? That you have to have Shotos, we looked at that, but is it good to have these characters be the ones where if someone puts you in front of the game and you've never played fighting games, they're like, here, this is the kind of character you need to know how to use? And I guess I'll ask God Kaiser.
Yeah, I don't. It's hard to say. Depends. Like you said, it's if you're super new to fighting games, I would say no.
Okay.
Because I feel Shotos are a good character if you already have knowledge of fighting games and go into a new game. Then they're cool because you already have some base knowledge about footsies and neutral gameplay and stuff. For new players, it's mostly like what I experience with when I have people over at my place and play fighting games, and they're not super into it. Most of the time they just want to press some buttons and do damage. So I feel like Jojoban does that kind of smart, because you have to Shoto character, and he's in the roster, and I think there's also a second one. Like after is Shoto for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the standard characters are Jotaro and Dio, which are just Unga Bunga. You can do 3 hit links and you get a shit ton of damage out of them, right?
That's true, yeah.
That's a bit better to get people hooked into it. Also, you don't have things like a lot of Shotos need their DP to actually anti-air, because other anti-air options are kind of whack. You don't have that problem with those characters. You mostly have just, I don't know, down heavy, and that's your anti-air, and it's way easier for people to press than doing in home motion.
Yeah, I mean that sort of became a thing too. Mortal Kombat sort of introduced that, right? Where everybody had like the same normals, and the first few Mortal Kombat games do not have Shotos or anything resembling archetypes. Sort of, they're very weird.
Medusa, Scorpion, and
Yes.
Ice Boy, I forgot his name, is Sub-Zero.
Yes.
They both have like DP-ish move and Fireball.
They do now.
They add before too, right?
No.
Pretty sure.
Because in the first one, everyone has, in the first, second, and third games, everyone has the same normals. So you do have special moves in those games, but they tend to not be based around like that sort of stuff. So Scorpion's moveset is like his get over here that everybody knows. That's sort of a fireball. We can count that, right? And he has his teleport punch, which, I mean, it comes out behind the opponent, but I guess he's now in front of him, so we could say that's a Tatsu. But
he like a DP, like he just like go into the ground and DP upward.
That's smoke.
I see.
Yeah, like Scorpion doesn't have this actually, and Sub-Zero has, well, shoot ice forward, make self into ice statue, and then shoot ice on the ground. His toolset. Yeah, exactly. No? Yeah, he has the sliding kick. You're right. He has the sliding kick that moves him forward, but he doesn't have any kind of anti-air.
The first one.
That's indeed the first ice car, now that you mention it. But you don't have like anti-air moves with these characters. By the way, they're also not player 1 and 2 at all.
Yeah, but it's mainly because like Mortal Kombat is jank, but yeah.
That's true, but what I meant to say anyway is that like everyone has the huge Mortal Kombat uppercut, which is down, and
heavy punch,
high punch.
It's still HP.
It is still HP, but it is supposed to go with elevation, because if you press it, you punch towards the person's face. So yeah, like that is an option. And I mean, like in anime games, you pretty quickly, I guess because of Arc System Works, I honestly don't know who did this first, get these sorts of head invulnerable, head and shoulders, upper body invulnerable 6A moves, right? Which anti-air. And if everybody has that, then I guess actually if you put that in your game, then you're conceding that yes, people should have an invincible move somewhere, and it's good if everybody has it, because otherwise we would have to put in more Shotos. I guess. Just a funny thing. What were we actually talking about? Mortal Kombat, down HP.
Those characters.
Jojo.
Yeah, and the point was that I think that Unga Bunga Rekka characters are actually better for beginners.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to think about super lot. They have like one motion with 3 buttons they have to use, and everything else is just one direction, normal input.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they get some small combos with good damage. I mean, they're most of the time not the best characters, like, but they're the characters which I experienced for super new people to fighting games are the most fun. Like when I play units with people, most of them tend to just play Enkidu, because they can actually do some stuff with them, and it's still fun and cool. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. Andela, what's your perspective on this?
I feel I can pretty much agree to that. If people are like really new to fighting games, haven't touched anything before, and they just want to press some buttons together with friends, something like that, some Munga Bunga stuff with big buttons is probably way better. But it feels like if you I haven't like watched that anywhere. It's just an opinion. It's like if you really want to learn fighting games and get into fighting games and like know more than just press a few buttons, do a bit of damage, but you actually want to sit down and understand how they work and stuff like that, then I feel like Shotos would probably be a bit better to learn like the real quote-unquote basics of fighting games, and not just to get away from that just smashing buttons and stuff. But that's just, I feel like that would be better. I don't know if it actually is. I haven't like...
Sure, I was just asking your perspective. Yeah. I mean, what the actual is probably just comes down to what sort of person is trying to begin fighting games. So it's really just broad opinion that we're going for here, right?
Yep.
And yeah, Vic, you haven't said anything about this yet.
Yeah. Well, Are they good beginner characters? I think yeah. First, like, play whoever you want. Don't play your Shoto because you think you have to. But I think there is a reason why they're like considered like standard characters and like are shown as like beginners characters, because like if you put Zappa, DZ, or like Venom as like standard basic character, I think
That's
like
kind
more
of
people
extreme,
cannot
though.
quit.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Though those are there are characters that shouldn't be the standard of the game. Definitely. And I don't think Shotos are in that category. They're not in the category that should not be player 1 and player 2. I just think there's maybe more characters like that. That's all I meant.
But I think
earlier.
it's really depend on people. If people like one thing, they should go for it. But if they don't care and you want to like orient them toward like a character that will be teaching them like a lot about fighting game and that they can like translate their skill more easily through any fighting game, a Shoto is a good idea, because as we say, like it's kind of standard and every fighting game has one. Whereas like if you like tell him like, yeah, go Unga Bunga with Zangief, well, I mean, good luck to showing like in other game where there is no grapple like the same way. So yeah, I think for me, like, they are good at that at least.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of agree, but feel like that's sort of like well, practically nihilist. just kind of like, this will help you the most. Is it going to be what you like the most? You'll have to discover that later.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, as I say,
real.
like, yeah, as I say, if they
I-
want to play something else, just play that. I will never
Yes.
say like you have to play Ryu to learn fighting game. I'm just saying like if they don't fucking know, then I think like learning a Shoto might be a better idea than random other character, I guess.
Yeah, Blanca. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, when I teach people fighting games, or they ask me just like what they should begin with, then the first thing I'm always like, even if the question is about the game or the character, it's always find the one that you'll have fun with, because then you're more motivated, right? And you should be having fun in the first place. Just so it's doubly important. Whereas if like if it's about like learning fighting games in general, I actually go then really further into the opposite direction and just come out at a similar solution where it's like, still play whoever you think is fun, because if you want to learn fighting games in general, then at some point you should be trying all sorts of characters for a little bit anyway, if that makes sense. So just I feel
but if people really can't choose and like don't want to choose and you have to answer something,
then I
would you,
choose
like,
for them.
Zappa? Yeah.
Oh, if I think that that's what the person would enjoy, I'd actually throw Zappa at them. But Zappa is not that difficult. If it's a character that's execution heavy, then I wouldn't recommend it to them. Or if it has like something that you won't understand until way long, and even then it's a struggle, like Alcyon from Breakers, I'd be like, nah. Unless you're like getting punched in the face, or in this case the tips of your feet and hands all the time.
Yeah.
Then sure. But as long as it's not a character where you're going to have like a really hard time because there's some base things that you just need to know about how fighting games work in its entirety, or you just need the muscle memory and executional the agility, right? Like that you're just good enough to get like specific motions and timings done. If those two aren't an issue, then I'll just recommend what I think fits the personality of the person. if I don't even have that, then I pick something that I want to see exist more. Just yeah. I mean, if somebody really can't decide, right, then I'm just like, well, okay, you know, there aren't that many Anji players. Why don't you play Anji? I mean, Anji actually happens to probably actually be a good character for beginners, but you know, just
Which Anji? Arcanaut Anji?
oh no, I meant like Guilty Gear Anji, the guy with the fans.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like
Cool guy with the glasses.
yeah, with the flash kick stomp and the weirdo flower that used to hit overhead. Yeah, it's just,
on it. Yeah.
yeah, or not flower, excuse me, it's like a butterfly or something, right? Yeah. Just I was thinking too much to Tuhu Yuyuko, which is all flowers and butterflies, right? It's just got it confused. Yeah. I think I got all of y'all's opinions in there, and I think mine were mostly present as I was moving things along. Let me just check my list. Is there anything interesting that we skipped? We skipped some non-essential things. That's good, they're non-essential. So yeah, so I guess we sort of agree that Shotos need to be standard characters, but they don't have to be beginner characters. But the problem is that beginner characters are based on individuals, so it's good to have Shotos as beginner characters anyway. I think that was sort of the way things went in, or was that just me and Vic now? So I'm asking Adela and Godkaiser, I guess.
I think Shotos are good if you want to actually learn the game, but if you're just new to fighting games, I feel like most people don't tend to like them and are more happy with just an Unga Bunga character before deciding on. And even then, after that phase, they decide on something completely else, because they go to the whole roster and look at each character, and then they're like, oh, I like this one, so I'm gonna learn this.
Yeah, I feel like that's the natural
And then they end
progression
up
of
with
things.
whole horse.
Yeah. Adela?
I just agree with that.
Okay. Good. Okay. In that case, I guess we can wrap it up. So I will. All right. Thanks for making it here today.